Good evening. Thank you for attending the January 27th, 2025 meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. This evening's agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. Printed agendas are available for our guests at the back of the room, or you may find the agenda on your mobile device by connecting to our district's website at www.wcsoh.org. Click on our district link, select Board of Education, and follow the board docs link to our current meeting agenda. There will be an opportunity for public comment this evening. There's a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board, and a timer will be shown on the screen. This portion of the meeting shall be limited to no more than 60 minutes. And with that, Ms. Marshall, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here.
Mrs. Valentine?
Here.
Mrs. Lebian?
Here.
Mrs. Meyer?
Here. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Next up is the fun part of the night. We have district highlights and recognitions, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Ms. Valentine and Ms. Leban.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. This is truly one of our favorite evenings to just have you all here and to recognize you all for the great work that's been done in the community and in our buildings. I'd like to first call up Ryan Hilpertz, president of the Westerville Parent Council, to join me. Westerville Parent Council is a nonprofit organization that unifies 35 member groups, including PTAs, PTOs, PTSAs, booster, and community organizations. They provide an avenue for collaboration, support, and the sharing of district-wide information to help ensure that families are engaged and connected in the district. Ryan is here to share the great work these groups are doing. We will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Ms. Leban. President Meyer, members of the board, as Ms. Leban explained, we essentially are the district level PTA. We serve as an umbrella council for all of those organizations. We bring the PTA mission to Westerville schools directly, which is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering communities to advocate for all children. School-family partnerships that foster authentic and strategic communication lead to collaborative efforts among students, families, and district staff. These are key drivers for the overall success of our students. The Westerville Parent Council Support Report once again demonstrates just that. I'd like to recognize the unbelievable ingenuity, dedication, time, and thoughtfulness of the hundreds of volunteers who are part of these organizations. It's possible I need to update that to thousands, actually. We would not be where we are today without these individuals giving school support to all of our organizations and students. I continue to be overwhelmed by the ways our caregivers show up for our children in our schools. The Westerville Parent Council Executive Board is pleased to share our support data findings for the fiscal year of 2024. Our schools and our that's what happens when you lose your place. We're happy to share our data findings with the Westerville Board of Education, our schools, and our community. For the 2023-2024 school year, we've compiled data from 24 of our 33 member groups. Westerville Parent Council and our member groups supported graduating seniors in May of 2024 from all high schools with scholarships totaling $41,850 for post-secondary education. Monetary support provided by member groups in fiscal year 24 collectively totaled $889,604.92. This support comes from the I didn't read that 92 cents closely when I was doing this. That's a very odd. I did not round. There's your proof that I did not round, 92 cents. That support comes from programs, projects, activities that enhance the educational and extracurricular well-being of students. We're talking about field trips, playground improvements, technology support. Money is raised through a multitude of fundraising activities, and much of that work then contributes to the thousands of hours of donated time. Those numbers are obviously impressive. They're surpassed by the sheer volume of volunteer hours contributed by these groups. Volunteers in our member groups provided 74,997 hours of donated time in areas such as music, athletics, art and theater support, literacy initiatives, student leadership development, tutoring, mentoring, countless clubs and experiences for students beyond the classroom. For perspective, these reported hours are the equivalent of $802,467.90 in compensation if those volunteers were paid with minimum wage in the state of Ohio. These hours are about $1,087,456 in Westerville school staff wages if we're using the lowest per hour rate for our contracted employees. To think of these hours just one more way, that's the equivalent of just over 51 full-time staff members in our district. Calculations aside, these contributions from support groups in our district are invaluable. Westerville Parent Council encourages all families, community members to connect with one or more of these groups and share whatever's the best fit for them, be that time, talent, or treasure. Thank you again for your time.
We want to thank everyone for all of the work and support our volunteers give. We are beyond grateful for each of you. We would like to give each of you a certificate of commendation with sincere gratitude for all of the remarkable volunteers for their generous giving of time and talent and their continuing legacy of enhancing the educational and extracurricular experience for all students in the district. We will present Ryan Hilpertz with her certificate, which we just did. And now we will call up our community groups to receive their certificates. First, we have Mrs. Sandra Ospino. With our special needs preschool PTA. It appears she's not here this evening. Well, thank you so much, Sandra, for all the great work that you are doing. From Alcott Elementary School PTA, we have Meg Sexton. Thank you. They are not with us today, but we had planned to recognize wonderful individuals from Amherst and Charrington Elementary School. With us this evening, we have Casey Walco from Emerson Elementary School PTA. Thank you so much. We also have with us Lindsay Mueller from Faust Elementary School. And coming from Hanby Elementary School PTA is Alex Meck. Unable to join us today were individuals from Hawthorne, Huber Ridge, and Mark Twain. However, with us today, we have Emma Nelson from McVeigh Elementary School PTA. And next, we have Alicia DeHaven from Minerva France Elementary School PTA. Next, help me welcome Heather Fitzwater from Point View Elementary School PTA. And help me welcome Jessica Porsche from Robert Frost Elementary School PTA. We would love to thank our rock stars from Whittier and Wilder Elementary Schools who weren't able to join us, but help me welcome Jessica Steen from Blendon Middle School, or Stein, excuse me. Next is Kim Love from Genoa Middle School, PTSA. Next is Molly Elston with Genoa Fine Arts Boosters. Thank you. Help me welcome Tanya Hewitt from Westerville Central Academic Boosters. Unable to join us this evening were individuals with Westerville Central Athletic Boosters, Westerville Central Music Boosters, Westerville Central Theater Boosters, Westerville North Academic Boosters, and Westerville North Athletic Boosters. Thank you all so much. Help me welcome Lisa Baer with Westerville North Music Boosters. Thank you all. Help me welcome Jennifer Koval with Westerville South Academic Boosters. And also with Westerville South Athletic Boosters. So thank you so much for all that you do, Jennifer. Thank you. Got it. Thank you so much. Can I please have Julie Cormel also join us today? Sorry we had missed you, Julie, but thank you for all that you do. And next up, help me welcome Tina Betty with Westerville South Music Boosters. And last but not least, we have Nikki Ducey with the Westerville South Theater Boosters. Thank you so much. And lastly, we just want to thank our wonderful partners with the Westerville Partners for Education for their great work. If we missed your name and you are here today, please connect with us. Thank you so much for all that you do.
All right, we'll continue with the commendations this evening. I'd like to call up Emma Nelson, the Executive Director of the Westerville Education Foundation and already a recipient of an award, to join me. So Westerville Education Foundation is a nonprofit, tax-exempt charitable organization with a mission to enrich the learning experience and broaden the minds of students through the funding and support of innovative educational programs. And Emma's here to share the great work that they are doing, so we will turn it over to her with some slides.
Thank you so much. Oh, yes.
We just want to give you this award.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to the board for giving me a few minutes to speak tonight, and for all of you for allowing me to. I know there's a lot of people to celebrate tonight, so I will try to go somewhat quickly. But as she said, we are a nonprofit serving Westerville City Schools, and our mission is to support innovative education, which we do through 2 grant cycles each year, one in the fall, which we wrapped in November, and one in the spring that I know it won't feel very spring-like yet, but it opens in late February. So if you're a teacher who has a great idea, we'd love to hear from you then. We have a board that is made up of passionate and committed people from throughout the Westerville community. Our president this year is Cam Pyatt. Our vice president is Jessica Diallo. And of course, we have 3 ex officio members serving in that we would like to appreciate and recognize: Superintendent Angie Hamburg, School Board President Christy Meyer, and Melanie Amato, who is the Executive Director of Communications and Community Engagement for the district. We greatly appreciate all of your time and contributions to the board. We know you're all very busy, wear many hats, so we really appreciate you. I just want to touch on a few programs and initiatives through the Westerville Education Foundation. First is our Teacher of the Month program. We always love an opportunity to celebrate the amazing teachers that we have throughout the district. Each month, we receive heartfelt nominations from students, parents, and district staff to honor educators who go above and beyond in the classroom. So some award highlights: they get delicious cookies donated by Schneider's Bakery, a certificate celebrating their achievement, and the most popular one, $100 added to their classroom accounts, because we know teachers spend a lot of their own money in their classrooms. As you can tell from the pictures too, district leadership makes time every month to come with us to surprise these teachers, and we know that recognition is greatly appreciated by our educators, so we appreciate that as well. March nominations open on February 1st, and we will be looking for teacher nominations from Westerville North, Robert Frost, and Heritage. So if you know an amazing teacher in one of those buildings you would like to help us recognize, you can scan the QR code here, or the nomination forms are also on our website. The Westerville Student Education Foundation is a project that aims to take 3 core values of WEF: collaboration, service, and leadership, and bring them to the high schools. So the mission is to empower students from the district's high schools to collaborate, serve, and lead by addressing key challenges within their schools and contributing to the broader community. This year, we gave them their shared focus, which is the We Are the Ville campaign, started by the district this year. We felt that the mission of sportsmanship and unity just fits so well with what we were trying to do. So these student groups will be working together to help further the mission and the message of We Are the Ville, and we are excited to see what they come up with. A plug for Grow and Glow. Grow and Glow is on Sunday, February 2nd at Minerva Park Middle School from 12 to 4 p.m. It's our annual free community festival to celebrate the amazing things happening throughout the district and also our community support for education. We think Westerville at its core is a community that supports and values public education, and this is a chance to celebrate that. We have a lot going on Sunday. We have over 50 exhibitors. That is from different student and building groups from throughout the district, community partners who will be hosting activities. We have food trucks. We have summer camps there to help you start your summer planning. We have 8 different student groups performing. We have a silent auction, and the Columbus Zoo will also be there with their animal ambassadors. So it'll be a packed day, and it's going to be a balmy, like 40 degrees, I think. So it'll be a good day to get out of the house and do something fun with the community. And if you're a student looking for service hours, we're also looking for volunteers. I mentioned our fall grant cycle, which wrapped in November. Just wanted to give a brief recap of that. We received 19 grant applications. We were able to approve 14 grants. $13,937 in funds were awarded. This was grant projects from 9 schools, and 2 were district-wide projects. And more than 5,000 students have been or will be impacted by these grant projects. I won't read all these to you, but you can see that through our grants, we're really addressing diverse needs from throughout the district. A couple that we're excited to promote: the African American Read-In. We are supporting again this year through support from the Church of the Messiah. The Arts Alive Festival at Westerville Central, an amazing program done by the art department there that is a school-wide arts festival we're excited to be able to support. And a student recording studio coming to Genoa Middle School. Those are just a few highlights. We also are assisting with the Westerville 4th grade STEM challenge. So that's 4th graders across the entire district. And podcasting will be coming to Westerville South High School Library thanks to a grant submitted by Brandy Young there. So 14 in all here, but we have 2 additional that we selected to be part of our Golden Butterfly campaign. We select 2 projects that we feel benefit the greater school community and therefore will have more community support, and we help promote them to fundraise from the community. WEF will then match $1,000 in funding for each of these projects. They're running at the same time, but they're not in competition. They each will receive funding. One project is from Genoa Middle School, Interdisciplinary Stained Glass, and they hope to bring in a resident stained glass artist and teach 7th and 8th graders about stained glass through art, math, and science. And then the other is Classroom Calming Kits at Westerville North, and they are hoping to support the social and emotional needs of their students while still keeping them in their learning environments by providing them with these classroom calming kits in every single classroom across the building. So this will run February 1st to February 28th. We will be sharing the link through WEF website and district communications. So if you're interested in supporting any of these worthy projects, we would highly encourage you to look out for that link. How you can support WEF, we'll always take donations, and there's a QR code there for that. Like I said, volunteers, especially Grow and Glow on Sunday, is a great opportunity to volunteer, especially for students, if you have students that need service hours. And just helping to spread awareness, we can better serve the community if they know who we are and what we do. And we have many sponsors, but I wanted to take a moment to thank our 3 presenting sponsors who are so essential to the work that we do: I-9 Sports, Nationwide Children's Hospital, and Mount Carmel St. Anne's. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate all the support.
Thank you. All right.
All right, I would like to take this next opportunity to introduce Ann Baldwin, our Executive Director of Secondary Schools, and she is going to help us with recognizing our school board members tonight because it is School Board Member Appreciation Month. So we're really excited to recognize you all, but most importantly, we have some special guests sitting in the front row. Super grateful to our students. So all of these students are part of our Superintendent's Advisory Committee, and they're part of a group that we bring together here from all 3 schools at the beginning of the year. And then our district level team goes out to their buildings then and meets with them, and we talk about all kinds of topics and feed them lunch, which I think might be their favorite part. But we get to talk about everything from things they'd like to see happening different in their buildings. They have questions about curricular offerings, just all kinds of topics. And so I've really enjoyed getting to know these kids. We just did our last one at the building with South. The other 2 were actually moved because we had calamity days for both of those. So I know they were super bummed they didn't get to see me, but probably glad to get a calamity day. So those are rescheduled. We have one of them this Friday and the other one next Friday. So I'll see North and Central the next couple of weeks. And I'd also like to give a quick thank you to their 3 principals sitting behind them who gave up their evening to be here tonight as well to support our students as they thank our board members. So thank you to all of you. And Mrs. Baldwin, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, President Meyer, members of the board, Superintendent Hamburg, and Ms. Marshall. I'd like to invite our high school students and principals to join me at the podium. January is Ohio School Boards Association School Board Recognition Month, and our students are here this evening to recognize our board members, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to them.
Good evening. My name is Marley Mahoney, and I'm a sophomore at Westerville Central High School.
And my name is Hayden Dennis, and I am a sophomore at Westerville Central High School, and we are here with our principal, Miss Dawn Sayer.
We are excited to be here this evening to recognize and express our heartfelt appreciation to some very special people who work hard behind the scenes to help our schools thrive, our school board members. As part of School Board Recognition Month, we want to celebrate and acknowledge the contributions of individuals who are dedicated to shaping the future of our educated system. On behalf of all the students, we want to say thank you to Christy Meyer, Anissa Liban, Jennifer Oldman, Tracy Davidson, and Louise Valentine for your support and commitment to our growth and success.
Each of you brings a unique perspective, ideas, and shared passion for improving our educational experience. From making decisions about school policies to ensuring that we have the resources and opportunities we need to play a crucial role in helping us succeed. President Christy Meyer, thank you for leading our board with dedication and passion. Your remarkable work in the nonprofit sector has been a source of inspiration to so many students here in Westerville.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Tsagai, and I'm a senior at Westerville North High School.
Good evening. My name is Mariah Chafin, and I'm a senior at Westerville North High School, and we're here with our president, Mr. Kurt Yancey.
Principal.
Principal.
All right. All right. Vice President Anissa Liban, we're so grateful for your leadership since joining the board. Your presence at our buildings and community events has been great to see. It's encouraging to know that we have a passionate advocate on our side championing our shared mission. Board Member Jennifer Altman, thank you for your incredible contributions to our community as co-founder of the Westerville Partners for Education and member of the Westerville Parent Council. Your work has strengthened educational opportunities for so many, and most importantly, go Warriors.
I'll stick to the script this time. Board Member Tracy Davidson, your dedication is deeply appreciated. Starting the Big Bus program has had a direct and meaningful impact on families across Westerville. You truly embody the spirit of an everyday kindness hero. Board Member Louise Valentine, thank you for your belief in public education. You have always been a strong supporter for what you believe in, and we are glad you are on your side and believe in us.
Good evening, all. My name is Imani Akita, and I'm a junior at Westerville South, and I'm here with our principal, not president, Mike Henze. President Meyer, Vice President Liban, Ms. Altman, Ms. Davison, and Ms. Valentine. Your hard work is noticed, even if we don't always have the chance to say it. You help make sure our voices are heard, our needs are met, and our potential is recognized. On behalf of Westerville City School students, thank you. Your leadership and commitment means so much to all of us, and your impact resonates through our community. We look forward to continuing this journey together. We are the Ville. And speaking of our schools, we have a certificate and a small gift as a token of our heartfelt appreciation. Thank you.
So we're going to ask our students and principals to come up to the front, and if our board members would actually come around and actually go through the line yourself to be recognized and have the opportunity to shake the hands of our school students and staff. And we also have a certificate of appreciation from OSBA. And then the students mentioned each high school personalized a small token of appreciation that is available for you to, at the end of the meeting too here. So thank you for your service.
That was very kind. Thank you so much for coming out on a Monday night. Okay. Next up, we have the superintendent's report. Ms. Hamburg.
All right, thank you so much. Well, I know I already said it, but again, I just want to thank you all for coming out. Just what a great way to start the meeting tonight, recognizing our many volunteers who give so many hours to our students themselves, here to appreciate our board members, our administrators here to support them, just appreciate everybody's support. So I am going to shift gears a little bit and want to kind of bring up one of our agenda items tonight. So Resolution 8.01 is an issue that'll be on the agenda tonight regarding a levy. And so I want to start out by saying that we know that we have a revenue issue as a district. So we are deficit spending. A big reason for that is our revenue has been cut by the state. We continue to see property value increases that affect our ability to be funded at the state level. Over the last few months, since the failure of our levy in November, we have been working to reduce our spending. So we've already made some significant reductions to our expenses, including budgetary reductions and over 30 positions for next school year that we are working on eliminating. At this time, after lots of thought and discussion, Nicole and I have had many conversations with our team, with individuals, and I would like to ask the board to consider pulling Resolution 8.01 from the agenda this evening so that we would not be on the ballot in May. This is not a recommendation that comes lightly. It doesn't mean that I don't think we need the revenue. We absolutely need additional revenue. But we really feel like at this time that we need to focus our efforts on our state funding. So we know that our state budget will not be finalized until the end of June. Nicole and I have some serious concerns out of the comments that we're seeing come out from the leadership of the 136th General Assembly about prioritizing defunding public education. We're very concerned that not only will we may not maintain the funding we have, we're worried about receiving less funding, which would be devastating to this community. Nicole's talked countless times, and I know has a number of presentations about how the funding responsibility has already been greatly shifted to local property taxpayers. And so at this time, we really feel like we need to join together and ask our community to help us in advocating, focusing our time and energy to educate community members on how to advocate with our state legislators and really try to make a presence with the legislators as they work on the next biennium budget. So we have a lot of work to do around this area, but the immediate areas that we would want to work with our community on would be stabilization of the state share for the biennium budget, updating the cost inputs to reflect the inflationary increases we've seen over the last several years. So by that I mean not continuing to base what it costs to educate a kid on outdated data. And very importantly, we need to see an increase in funding for special education. We've not seen that change in years. They've done studies at the state level, have not implemented those recommendations, and as I talk with my colleagues in other districts, that continues to be an area that is greatly underfunded. So I want to be clear that with this recommendation, we still know that we need additional revenue to be able to maintain our operations. Without adequate state funding, we will need to be back on the ballot soon. But with the timing of the biennium budget, everything else that's going on with funding, we feel that this would be the best course of action for this spring for us to focus on.
So a couple of questions. So what I heard you say is your new recommendation, not knowing what the funding from the state will be, gives us time to work with our legislators to figure, or to give them an idea of what it really costs to educate a child, so we can better plan in the future.
Correct.
That's the first thing. That was your recommendation. I want to revisit, and I'm not asking for each little specific reductions we've already made. Can you remind us on those?
Yes, so we started with immediately after the levy failure in November. We asked our building and department leaders to eliminate some money from their budgets for this current school year. And I know I've mentioned it previously, but just again want to thank them for cutting $4.8 million from the budgets. So obviously those are activities, things that we had planned to do that we're just not doing this year. Those pay for things like, certain repairs or upgrades. We've put off curriculum adoptions, reducing professional development opportunities, reducing the purchase of instructional materials and supplies, types of instructional software. We had some unfilled SRO positions that we're leaving unfilled for the year, some other vacancies that we had that we're just not filling. Looking at other non-instructional materials and supplies that we were able to defer some purchases on as well. And then, because we did not pass our bond issue, looking at how do we use our permanent improvement funds differently, postponing projects that we need to do on buildings, to just the essentials at this point. So with that, we were able to come up with about 4.8 million. It's actually probably a little more because we continue to finesse that as we are able to seize on opportunities. And then we've been able to come up with another few million for next year as we are getting resignations, retirements coming in, looking at how we can shift our staff members around, cover things differently. And that'll result in, at this point, we're trying to have as little impact on kids as possible, but it might be some of the auxiliary services that we're able to provide. It might be support for our staff members that we're not able to provide at the same level as far as, support for them to help them in their positions. And so those are the things that we're looking to continue to do. We will continue to be in a deficit. So as Nicole has talked about multiple times, we have to continue chipping away at that. We do need additional funding, either from the state or local level, but that's what we feel like we need to focus on at this point.
Okay. So if we're not on in May, that means additional reductions. Can you give us a picture of what that might look like?
So again, looking to do those through attrition wherever possible. Our state teachers' retirement system has made a temporary change on the retirement age, so we are anticipating and starting to see more retirements come in. They've made it temporarily one less year, so we're seeing some more of those come in. So again, how can we shift those around and save some money at that high end of the scale with some of our retirements, not filling positions, using positions differently is one of the big ones. We're also getting ready to do budgeting for next year. And so, super appreciative that we were able to cut so much out during the school year, but we know the year was already up and running. So we're trying to reduce a little bit further next year as we look at the year in its entirety. So we're really trying to tighten up there, again, which means there will be some activities, some things that we don't do as a result.
Okay. So Nicole, if we're looking at, so we're not looking at May, potentially November, talk to us a little bit about what collections would look like.
So it would really depend on where we land with the state funding. I think that that's a big piece for us, and to see what, my biggest concern is that they'll continue to further reduce what they're providing for us, which would mean that any levy that we might have on now, if we can't predict that, might not be sufficient for what the needs are too. So it'll depend on that. It will also depend on what efficiencies we can find through attrition, as we are seeing turnover. We see turnover every year as we cross school years, but with the retirement system changes and where we land.
So I know in the past, you've done the history of school funding.
Yeah.
I think we did it in the fall. I've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah.
I think we need to see it again. I think the community needs to see it again. So if we could somehow squeeze that in somewhere.
Sure. Yeah, I did a presentation specifically just around our school funding
Yes.
and the erosion of our state funding. I'd be glad to bring that back.
I think the other big thing I want to point out that's a big unknown, we just have so many variables that are up in the air right now. So in addition to state funding is what is going on at a federal level with funding. The next few months are going to be really key for us to know what types of revenue we have that we can rely on moving forward. But, I'm sure everyone's heard there's talk about dismantling the Department of Education, that potentially those funds would flow through our state Department of Education. We don't know exactly what that would look like. We do know that we don't receive full funding from our state. It's based on a wealth percentage. And so, we have concerns about, would we receive all the funds that we're currently getting from the federal government? Would we receive those from the state government? Most of the funds that we receive from the federal government pay for special education, a lot of our staffing in that department. And so those are services that our children still need. And so we would need to be able to pay for those regardless of where that revenue is coming from. So these are all very big things that we're going to be watching this spring that will help inform what we need to do moving forward.
So can you remind us that when we talk about these cuts that we're making, and we're talking about financial dollars, right? Do those continue to go forward over the years? They're not just cut now and then they'll come back later, right? You've talked a
Right,
couple of
so
times
in
about this.
general, I mean, I think I always want to give the disclaimer that, we are going to need to evaluate what our students' current needs are. So there might be something that we, might eliminate a position now, and then we might have an influx of a certain demographic of student that needs that service, and we don't have enough. So, I don't want to speak in absolutes, but in general, yes, I would say that would be correct.
But the number, the
number,
financial number will
The financial
stay.
amount, yes.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to, because our revenue's been cut from the state and we're not seeing much of an increase from our property taxes as well, because that voted millage also stays stable without a new levy. We're seeing stagnation or a decrease in the different areas of our revenue. We all know inflation continues to go up, so we do have a yearly deficit in our spending, and so there are only two ways to eliminate a deficit: reductions and revenue. And so, it's my recommendation that we're working on both of those simultaneously, and we're going to continue to look at where can we reduce and become more efficient as we work on securing additional revenue.
So given that we won't be on the ballot, and what does this mean in terms of next school year? What does that look like for the next school year? Because we've talked about how we need to know for planning purposes.
So our recommendation, as Nicole and I have been working with the team, is that we continue the approach we've been taking this spring, which again is that we're looking at opportunities for efficiencies, primarily through attrition when possible. But also we have been evaluating all of our different departments, doing some benchmarking against other similar districts, like, do we see any areas where we could be more efficient? And so we're trying to make some staffing recommendations based off that we've already talked about. And we're going to continue to do that moving forward.
Yeah, I think we talked about, we might see some secondary class sizes a little bit larger, fewer course offerings, those sorts of things. Maybe a reduction in some supplemental offerings. Just
Might be less sections of a class at the
Yeah.
high school level, for example. Instead of, 4 sections, we might have 3. What does that mean for students? It means that, in a perfect world, we would offer every class, every period, so they don't ever have to make choices and they can take everything they want to. We would do our best to still design a schedule that, intuitively makes sense with when a kid that's taking this math class is also a kid that's probably taking this science class, and making sure that they're available at different times throughout the day. But those are the types of things so we don't want to eliminate programs, but can we, some of our upper level course, we have a very robust upper level course offerings. And so, can we combine some of those sections and have a little bit larger class size to save on some staffing efficiencies would be the types of things that people might notice. But our goal would be that the class is still available.
I think some of our staff we may see staff traveling more between buildings as we're spread out very far and wide in the district with.
So, just kind of going off of that procedurally, could either of you just kind of explain what this means for us as a board? Because we recently voted to place this on the levy. What are those next steps?
Yeah, so the board passed the resolution of necessity, which I filed with the county auditor. We got the certificate back, so that's in with the resolution to proceed, which is what's on the agenda tonight, which we're saying we think that we should have that pulled at this point to focus at the state level. That just means that we won't file the resolution. The board won't, if the board doesn't approve it tonight, it won't be filed, and we just won't be on the ballot in May. There isn't anything more that we would need to do after that.
So with the effort focusing on the state share, essentially, these next few months, just for those who don't know how this works, right? The next GRF budget, these are biennial budgets. It will be signed in theory into law by June 30th, go into effect July 1st, and would last 2 years.
Yes.
So what you're saying is we need to work on getting that as best we can to advocate during this period while that's in play, right? And then we would know by July 1st what we can count on from the state share for the next 2 years.
Correct.
In
So they have
theory.
done temporary measures in the
Yes,
past.
they
So
have. They have,
they could
yeah.
always do that, but yes, typically we would see it by the end of June.
So can you just run through for folks? There's the state share, there's the local share.
Sure.
There's a little bit of federal dollars.
Sure.
Where we are now, and then I have a historic question for you about how that's
Sure.
changed.
Sure, so we, basically, the state looks at our community wealth factors. They look at our property values, they look at resident income that they pull from like federal returns and things like that. And they take that and they compare us to the rest of the public schools in the state. And based on that, they calculate a wealth factor. So our state share percentage currently is about 23 to 24%. Then for they take a cost, what's the cost to educate a student? So there's a base cost, which is about $8,000. And then there's some categorical add-ons to that base cost. And then they take that 24% and they apply it to that cost and they say that's the share that the state is gonna fund. And then the Westerville Local Community School District needs to fund the rest of it. The issue, there's several issues. One, the special ed studies that Angie had talked about, they've never really implemented what is the actual cost for special education. And we have seen the needs grow significantly over students, not just the numbers, but also the needs increase. So they've never funded that. They've never fully funded us because we're in a phase-in period, right? The last two bienniums, they were planning on phasing it in. But that cost is based on 2022 numbers today, and that's been the same for the whole biennium. And so last year, the base cost was the same as this year. But our wealth factor has been updated both years of the biennium, and it's continued to be updated throughout this process. So the state is reducing our share, but they're keeping the base cost stagnant, which that's the main reason why we saw a $4 million reduction just in this year. And it was mostly the result of those 2023 reappraisals that impacted our local wealth factor. So in the state of Ohio, it is a shared responsibility to educate students for the public school system between the local community and the state. And the state has historically just continued to decrease its share of that responsibility to our community. And when I go over my historical presentation that I did last fall, I have lots of data and lots of graphs to show how state policy has continued to erode how we can receive funds outside of local property taxes from homeowners. They're pushing everything away from businesses and private entities to local homeowners and farmers, basically.
And in that, so we last passed an operating levy in 2019.
Yes.
So what has that state share, what's the change been in those, what is this now 5.5, years?
So our state shares dropped 20% since we last passed that operating levy. And when we talk about millage, and I don't want to, without having slides and numbers to really go through this, it can get really complicated. But because we're subject to House Bill 920 with property taxes on those voted levies, so we've lost about 13 mills in operating rate since that 2019 levy. And that's because of, as values increase, the county auditor drops the rates. And again, when I do my presentation, I'll have tables and show you.
And we have not asked to vote 13 mills back in. I mean, essentially, it's a real change in revenue. It's a real change in revenue.
Yeah, and the idea between House Bill 920 is that the revenue on those voted levies stays the same for the school district. It just shifts who's paying that tax bill. As I have shared in that presentation, that, during the 2023 reappraisals, there was an article in the Columbus Dispatch that said Franklin County for Westerville School District saw an average, homeowners saw an average increase of 38%. So because of House Bill 920, if your value went up by more than 38%, you probably saw an increase in your tax bill. If it went up less than 38%, you probably saw a decrease in your tax bill. But if your value stayed the same, you probably didn't see much of a change. And according to the county auditor in Franklin County, 30% of the residents in our school district in Franklin County saw a decrease in their tax bill as a result of the reappraisal. But that just means that it's shifted to somewhere else that somebody else is paying.
Right.
And I don't want to negate the fact that does mean that 70% did see some sort of increase, right? But it just shifts who's paying the bill. But I think it's confusing to folks because they think, oh, well, values went up by 38%. The school must be receiving
38%
all of this
more or whatever, yeah.
funding. Yeah. And then it gets even more confusing because, you know, we're one public school district out of 600 plus in the state. And about 400, a little over 400 schools in the state are subject to the 20 mil floor. So that means that that rate won't drop below 20 mils, but we're not at the 20 mil floor. But the schools that are at the 20 mil floor, they are seeing an increase of that total percentage. But that doesn't apply to us. And so when the state legislature is having conversations, they've had a whole committee on property tax reform, lots of hearings. I think it's very confusing when some school districts are seeing 38% increases in revenues and some school districts aren't because of just the mechanism and how that works. So anyway, I'll bring my presentation back. I think some visuals will help in that conversation. I do think this is the right decision. I think, you know, we are constantly, I feel like, you know, I've been doing this a long time. Every 2 years, I'm always worried about what state funding will bring and what it will look like. And I think we've made a lot of progress with the Fair School Funding Plan. And don't get me wrong, it was changed from the way it was originally intended to be. I think a lot of the cost studies need to be implemented. I think the state needs to make a priority to fund its public schools. And I will say, I know I'm a broken record, but they continually look at us to solve all of the world's problems, but they don't fund us for it. And it's super frustrating to me as I see additional mandates come through. I mean, I just think about the cell phone policy, right? We had to implement a cell phone policy to take cell phones away from kids or make sure they're not using the kids during the school day. Like, that's more supervision and all of the things that I think it's gone well. I think it's been great in our schools, but like, that's still one more thing that we are responsible for as a public school district. And we have a whole list of things that they've added through that process. So that's my soapbox.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just one other question about tax, property tax. I want to just make this super clear. So if it's not a clear question, tell me. But who pays Westerville City Schools property tax? Where are the boundaries for that?
So the boundaries, so everyone within the Westerville School District boundaries. So I don't think we have a map in this room. Mr. Reeves has a very lengthy presentation on just this question, but everyone that falls within the Westerville Schools attendance boundaries pays the same property tax rate to the county auditor for Westerville Schools. I think there is some confusion because we'll see listings that will say Columbus taxes, but Westerville Schools, they are still paying Westerville Schools property taxes. They are talking about Columbus City taxes. That has nothing to do with the property taxes to the schools. Everyone pays the same rate. If you live within the Westerville Schools boundaries, you pay the same tax rate. There's a residential rate and there's a commercial rate. Those are the same respectively for both of those classes.
We are the taxing authority.
We are the taxing
We are the
authority.
school district.
Yes.
So, speaking of, while we're on this topic of property tax, there's a lot of conversations that are happening down at the State House. Some of them are about property tax relief.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us what you've been hearing and how that might impact our district?
Yeah, so there's been lots of conversation around property tax relief, specifically about expanding the homestead exemption. So currently, there is a calculation based on income, or if you're disabled, a senior citizen based on income qualification can exempt a portion of their value for their property tax bill. It's not a huge exemption the way it's currently set. And so there's a lot of conversation about changing that threshold and making that, higher. So we receive about 64% of our funding from property taxes. Currently, the homestead exemption that exists, the state reimburses the schools for any lost revenue with that exemption. So I think any conversation around property tax relief, my hope is that the state won't further try to defund public schools, and that they will continue to reimburse us for any lost revenue from any tax relief that they would implement. So in 2013, prior to 2013, we used to have the 10% residential credit. So it was an automatic 10% off of residential properties. And then it was an additional 2.5% for owner-occupied property. And so that meant if you own your home, you live in it, you automatically saw a 12.5% reduction in your tax. It was called the rollback. The state eliminated that rollback in 2013 on all new levies after that point. And so they continue to fund us for the previous levies prior to 2013. And so with homestead and rollback altogether, it's about $14+ million in revenue for our operating funds. So if the state is looking at reducing that, that would be another huge hit for us. So yeah, again, I think this is why it's important to advocate with the state. I mean, I think that we all agree that property taxes, is not the ideal way to fund schools. And not every school relies as heavily on property taxes as we do. And we're all different around the state. But I think that it's important for the state to understand the policies that they've implemented over the last several decades have continued to push the needle to where it's shifted who's paying for schools to homeowners and farmers pretty significantly. And we'll go over all that when I do the presentation, but it's frustrating to watch.
So I love this opportunity just to educate people. And I'm going to put Councilmember Grimes on the hot seat right now, just so you know, and Mr. Reeves. So Mr. Reeves gave probably one of the best presentations I have ever seen on school district boundaries and how we started here in Westerville when we had dinner with, we didn't have dinner. We don't have dinner with them anymore. Sorry.
We didn't have dinner.
When we met with the city last week. It was outstanding. So I'm going to publicly ask the city if you could somehow partner with us so we could do a big presentation and educate people just what our boundaries look like and how the school district started and how it's not going to change, because I learned stuff. I mean, I thought it was amazing. Like, I need to hear it 5 more times. So maybe we can chat after. Great, thank you. I'm getting the thumbs up. And Reeves, can I count you in? Awesome. Thank you so much.
And we know he'll be presenting Sunday
Yes, Sunday at Grow and Glow.
twice.
Okay, the whole one, the whole big? Okay.
The abridged version.
Well,
Yeah.
we do want to see the long, we
I
hear
was gonna
there's a
say,
very long
Yes,
one.
that's what I'm, yes, even,
But I
haven't sat
think
through the
he's
long one
presenting
yet. I don't
twice
know.
at Grow and Glow on Sunday,
Great.
correct?
aw. That's great. Thank you so much.
One of the other things that, you know, if we're talking about the public and asking the public to help advocate with our state legislators, state senators, and state representatives, is maybe helping to educate the public on what does that mean to advocate to those folks? How do you know who they are? How do you get in contact with them? What does that look like? I think just from somebody who, you know, a decade ago wasn't as involved as I am now, the average person is busy living their lives. So maybe that's something that we could either do at a future board meeting or do it at, you know, a coffee chat or something with the community to help them better understand what advocacy looks like on behalf of, you know, public schools and what kind of pressure points there are when it comes to talking with their state legislators about it.
So we will be putting together some info sheets on that, some trainings, and also some social media campaign posts that we can push out so we can try to hit people in different venues.
Yeah, because if we are going to postpone any kind of levy until after we know more from specifically the state legislature, but also at the federal level, but specifically with the state, then we want to make sure that we are really making our voices heard from Westerville as to what the needs are. And we're not the only district that is in this situation. I know Olentangy, they had a levy failure last year as well. They're a very wealthy district, so there are districts in Central Ohio that are in this same boat, so.
I would just add, we've been seeing in the paper this discussion about Speaker Huffman's priority being really defunding public education, and talking about how the third phase of the Cup-Patterson funding formula would not be implemented in the way that we were all hoping for, if at all. And that really got people's attention around the state, and the community called in to certain legislators, and as a result, a fair number of legislators said, hey, we're not on board with doing this, and actually expressed that. So I think there's real power in our community if we can come together around this for public education.
I think that's important. When Nicole and I meet with our legislators regularly, and I know many of our board members do as well, and they listen, but they listen a lot more when it's community members, because, they look at us and think, oh, well, you're paid to think that.
Right.
So if we can educate our community members on the impact, and they really want to hear from their constituents.
I was just going to say from because, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, at least these last several months, has been we obviously have a revenue issue, and we talked about some of the steps that we're taking in terms of attrition and to save as much money as possible. And I know we'll have more ongoing conversations, but could you give, just for the public, more examples of things that we're doing to save as much money as possible? I mean, something that comes to mind is renting out facilities in the summer. Like, what are we doing creatively, right? So that the public knows that we are really trying to be intentional. So could you just give some examples?
Sure.
Outside of the attrition?
Hit a few earlier, but I guess one I haven't said tonight that's a big one is looking at how do we use our permanent improvement dollars differently. What that means is we do have some aging facilities, so it would be doing that, absolutely necessary maintenance, but not moving forward with some of the other projects. So when we were on the ballot in the fall, we had a bond as part of that combo ballot issue, looking to make upgrades to 4 of our older buildings. And so since we're not moving forward with some of those projects, can we look at purchasing more buses? Buses are very expensive, by the way. School buses, our technology, things like that out of permanent improvement, so we can shift those expenses from our general fund to free up money to help with that deficit. Looking at, we're hearing to expect huge increases in electricity next year. So that's an area we're expecting that coming. But how do we look at ways to be more efficient, as we have switched out light bulbs and, just different ways to be efficient with our energy costs. We're constantly evaluating and looking at that. So how do we utilize our spaces and facilities? You mentioned a little bit there. In the past, we used to rent out to large organizations outside of the community as a moneymaker with our facilities. So looking at revisiting that. We haven't done that as much since COVID just because of some staffing shortages. But that is the potential to we try to offer our spaces to our community organizations at a pretty reasonable rate because they're already in the community and paying taxes, but how do we capitalize on some of those other opportunities to generate some revenue? So trying to think creatively, just really being mindful, not that we weren't previously, but even more mindful of, everything we're doing and really evaluating. And right now we're kind of looking through all of our purchasing processes and tightening those up and, looking at how do we approve things and, making sure that we have that big picture all the time. We're a huge organization. And so, lots of processes. And so it's a good time to just really look at all those and make sure we're being as efficient as absolutely possible across the board in all areas.
If I could just piggyback on that, I think if folks want to look at the state report card, right, 72% of what we spend is classroom instructional and support. Right, so that remaining 28% is everything else, the electricity you're talking about, all transportation costs, food service, like all of the rest of it.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we're hearing like it's a little bit here, it's a little bit there, it's a little, because we're trying not to have a tremendous impact on that 72%.
Correct. And at some point, I mean, I always say you can only cut so many Post-it notes, you know? So we are a service industry. The majority of what we spend is on people, the people that deliver services to our students. And so we do need additional revenue. Again, recommending we focus at the state level with our revenue right now, but we have to have additional revenue to continue our services with the inflation that we're seeing. So that's assuming we stay fairly flat with our enrollment, but just with the same number of students we have to deliver the same number of services we're currently delivering with inflation, we can't do that with the same revenue. It's just, the math doesn't work.
And the odds of the state not adding an additional mandate to us in the next couple of years, I think is pretty slim based on where we've been historically. So there continues to be additional things that we're required to do without additional funding.
I mean, we're in the middle of we've talked with the board previously, but just a reminder, we're still in the middle of a literacy adoption because of the science of reading requirement, which is all great things, but very, very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars that cost that you might hear the state talk about. They provided some flow-through funding to reimburse teachers for training, but they're not paying for the materials. So we have to replace our curricular materials as a result. So those are the types of things that Nicole's talking about that, get dropped on you fairly quickly and are significant amounts.
With that being said, if we are not on the ballot in May, in terms of the cash that we have on hand, and let's assume everything stays flat, the funding we get from the state stays the same, the federal government money doesn't go away, we're still going to need to be back on the ballot at some point soon, correct?
Yeah, I don't think there is any situation that could work out and that we wouldn't need to be on the ballot at some point. Yeah.
So I think what we're hearing here is that we're pushing pause so that we can really advocate at the state level, make sure our state funding is protected, so that we're able to understand really what our true needs are. And there's a lot of uncertainty, as you've pointed out, at the federal level, at the state level. This, I guess, gives us an opportunity to be that community that maybe flips some of our legislators more to our side in public education. So with that then, I was,
Make a motion, right?
Yeah.
To remove
8.01,
8.01, resolution to proceed to the levy, that one. I mean, I can read it all if you want, but we're removing it,
You're fine, I know what
right?
you mean.
I'll second.
Okay, any more discussion before we vote? All right, Ms. Marshall, will you take the call?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to enter into executive session for the purposes of discussing the employment and compensation of public employees?
Second.
May I have a first?
So moved.
Okay. Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. We're going to enter into executive session. You're welcome to stay, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
7:09.
Thank you for staying with us. We are back. We're moving along to public comments, and there are none. So we will move along to board minutes. And may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the organizational regular Board of Education meeting held on Monday, January 13th, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Any changes needed? All right, Ms. Marshall? you call the roll.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Westerville Board of Education joint meeting with the Westerville City Council held on Thursday, January 23rd, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Any changes? Okay. Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Abstain, I was not able to attend.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And moving along to financials, may I have a motion to proceed? Oh, sorry, we rescinded that.
Yep, I was going to say, skip that one.
Okay, 8.02. May I have a motion to approve the financial reports and investments for November and December of 2024?
So moved?
Second.
And Ms. Marshall, will you talk to us about this, please?
Yes, thank you, President Meyer, members of the board. So we have, we only had one board meeting in December, so we're going over November and December's financials tonight. And for November 30th, for the general fund, we had year-to-date receipts of $99.2 million and year-to-date expenditures in the general fund of right around $98 million. And then we ended with an unencumbered general fund balance of $152.8 million. And then for all funds, we had year-to-date receipts of $129.7 million, year-to-date expenditures of $143.8 million, and ended with unencumbered fund balance for all of our funds at $207.9 million. And for December 31st, so just a reminder, this is halfway through our fiscal year. We run July 1st through June 30th on our financials. We had year-to-date receipts of $134.3 million, year-to-date expenditures of $114.7 million. I do want to mention the year-to-date receipts include the transfer back of the $30 million that we've discussed previously, where the board rescinded that resolution since the bond issue failed. And we ended with an unencumbered fund balance for our general operating fund at $170.9 million. And then for all funds, year-to-date receipts, $171.4 million, year-to-date expenditures, $196.1 million, and we ended with unencumbered fund balance for all funds at $197.7 million. And that's all I have for you today. Any questions?
Doesn't look like it. You can take the vote.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I take personal consent as one agenda item? You good with that? All right. May I have a motion to approve the personal consent agenda 9.01 to 9.10?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Lieband, members of the board, Ms. Marshall, and Ms. Hamburg. I have a very short report for you this evening. Tonight's personnel consent agenda includes action items with regard to resignations, leaves of absence, contract status changes, one-time pays, and other employment-related decisions. And at this time, I'm happy to take any questions you may have about the items.
Any questions?
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Will you take the call?
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And moving along to old business, 10.01. May I have a motion to approve the 2026-2027 academic calendar?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All right. Will you take the vote?
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve policy 5780 student parent rights?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome, Mr. Reeves.
This is the
Thank
final.
you. Good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Lieband, Superintendent Hamburg, Treasurer Marshall, and members of the board. This is the first reading of policy 90.
This is our final.
This is the final reading of your
Yes.
last policy.
That's all right.
Student parent rights.
You're really
Wait a minute.
excited. I love it.
You're a few.
We got a couple more and then you're up. Hold tight.
All right, I just saw you jump up and I was like, all right, okay, well, can we take a vote?
He's so excited.
You ready?
Yeah.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes?
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Oh, yes. And may I have a motion for the final reading to approve policy 7540.09, artificial intelligence?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And can we take the first readings of policy 1130? I know we don't, but like, can we talk about them all at once?
Sure.
3113, 4113, conflict of interest, because they're all very similar.
Yes, so this is me. So these are all pretty much the same policy. It just covers different classifications of employees. And so the changes here, it's our conflict of interest policy essentially, and it just adds board members to those which the policy applies, and added language to define nominal value as $25 in regards to gifts, and added language that expands on the need to disclose fraud, conflict of interest, bribery, or gratuity violations in regards to federal awards. These things have always been in place. This is just updating our policy to reflect what is current law. So that's the first three there.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, great. And you're up again for the first reading of policy 60/2020, budget preparation.
Yes, so this is basically our tax budget. We submit a tax budget to the county auditor. So Franklin County is our most populous county, so that's actually who sort of governs our tax budget, and it goes to the Budget Commission. So they actually require an alternative budget, so this policy is reflecting what Franklin County's practice is. And that's why you see us removing Delaware County. We're still part of Delaware County. That didn't change. It's just the tax budget is done by Franklin County, so it doesn't really apply.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Okay, moving along. The first reading of policy 6320, purchasing and bidding. Ms. Marshall.
Yes, so this is an update again with a change in law. We're changing the number of quotes to match the federal procurement standards, and we're increasing the supplies, materials, and equipments needing quotes to $75,000 from $50,000, and again updating based on what is in current law. And then competitive bids was $50,000, and now that's changing to the amount approved and published by the Director of Commerce to align with changes made to the state level, stemming from changes from Senate Bill 168. The competitive bid threshold will now increase by 3% each year in January, and will be $77,250 for calendar year 2025 under this policy. And again, that's to match the changes in law.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Next up, we have the first reading of policy 6460, and this is vendor relations, and this is you again, Ms. Marshall.
Yes. So we are adding language for airline rewards, airline miles. So this is not new law, but we wanted to make sure that was reflected in the policy. It was something that came from Neola as an update, and just so that that's clear. And then also some language around Senate Bill 29 with technology providers and contracts. I tell everyone Senate Bill 29 is just the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to our board policy. So another policy changed with that.
Thank you. Okay. And then the first reading of policy 8310, public records. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, so just a minor update here. One, stating that we will comply with the Public Records Act, which again has been law for a very long time, and also defines educational support services data, added to the list of things that are not included as public records. Not really new, but
yeah,
just codified in policy. So
great, thank you. All right, and we have the first reading of policy 9160, public attendance at schools. Mr. Reeves, welcome.
Thank you. and I will never live that down. Good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Liban, Superintendent Hamburg, Treasurer Marshall, members of the board. This is the first reading of Policy 9160, Public Attendance at School Events. This policy has been revised to reflect changes adopted by the legislature in House Bill 147, impacting the cost of admission for school-affiliated events, including discounts for students enrolled at schools participating in the event. In plain language, the ticket price to an event must be the same whether the attendee paid electronically or by cash, and the cost of the student ticket must be less than that price. Additionally, the policy states that we make audiences aware of the rules for videotaping any school event. As a reminder, our board elected to maintain the same price for electronic and cash tickets when the cash option was first required by law, and we have administrative guidelines outlining the videotaping of school events. This policy revision therefore captures in policy what we have already been doing in practice.
Thank you. Any questions? Really appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right. Oh, and here's a nice part of the night too. Moving along to 12, recommended action, standing business. 12.01 is donations. Ms. Marshall, will you talk to us about these great?
Can we do a motion in a second?
Oh, yeah. May I have a motion? Sorry. May I have a motion to accept the donations in a second?
So moved.
Second.
All right, now will you talk to us about our wonderful community donating all this?
Yes,
wonderful-
thank you. So as you heard tonight, all of the generous donations of not just time, but also funding that our parent support groups provide to us. Here's another list of just lots of our generous community that's supported different clubs in different areas throughout our school district. Our current request, since it would have been since October's report, it is $51,404.25. That brings our fiscal year-to-date total to $212,936.75. So we're very grateful to our community for all of the things they continue to support.
Very grateful. Any additional comments? Okay, we take the vote.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Liban?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes, and continuing on with the great stuff, 12.02, may I have a motion to approve the early graduate candidates who have completed all local and state requirements?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you. Good evening, President Meyer, members of the board, Superintendent Hamburg, and Mrs. Marshall. We have several candidates for graduation for you to consider this evening. These are members of the class of 2025 that will be completing their graduation requirements before their cohort in May, and several of them will be choosing to move on to their post-secondary career immediately upon completing those requirements. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just congratulations to them.
Thank you.
You take the vote. Thank you.
Mrs. Liban?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes, and may I have a motion to approve the resolution to revise the 2025 Board of Education meeting calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Any last comments before we?
Just a note about this. This is a change from the previous calendar, just for informational purposes only. Capitol Conference, the November dates for Capitol Conference, OSBA Capitol Conference is how it's labeled on here. The dates changed for that, so that's why we're bringing it back and updating it. And it also reflects that July 9th date that we discussed at the last board meeting. So, yeah, just wanted to let you guys know what the change was.
Thank you. Okay, any other? All right, will you take the vote?
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Liban?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve an agreement with VSWC Architects, Inc. for design and construction administrative services for the Genoa walk-in cooler freezer replacement project?
So moved.
Second. Welcome, Mr. Swartz.
Thank you. President Meyer, Vice President Lebon, members of the board, Superintendent Hamburg, Treasurer Marshall. So as the resolution says, this is for a contract with VSWC Architects for the Genoa Middle School replacement of their walk-in cooler freezer. The contract's in a total of $34,000. It's important to note for the public and the board, we're talking a lot about funding issues. This project, including the architect, is 100% funded from food service dollars. So we don't use permanent improvement, nor do we use bond funds. So again, repeat one more time, this is food service dollars paying for this contract and the resulting hopeful construction project contract as well. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Doesn't seem to be any, so could you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the resolution awarding the contract for bid package 4 to Adena Corporation for the Walnut Springs Middle School remodeling project as the lowest responsible bidder and authorizing execution of contract with Adena Corporation?
So moved.
Second.
And again, Mr. Swartz, will you talk to us
Thank you
about
to
this?
all of you. So this resolution, as it says, is a contract with Adena Corporation in the amount of $157,982.00, since that's what's important tonight. It's important to note this is funded 100% through permanent improvement dollars. We've talked about that a few times tonight. This is in full alignment with everything in the use of those funds in terms of warm, safe, and dry, and basic needs and necessities of our students. Again, this involves, first and foremost, the creation of an ADA SLC restroom. So it's essentially an assisted changing room for students that need that. We've put this in many buildings, and this will bring this building up to par. Also, some additional electric work and some engineering labs. And then close to my heart, an enlarged door so we can get percussion instruments into the building. Right now, they have to go outside the building to get back in with drums and things like that. So this will just make that solve a problem that's been there for quite some time for them. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
I'm sure moving those in snow and ice is probably really challenging.
Having done that, it's not fun for the
Yeah,
record.
but- Any questions? All right, thank you. Would you take the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the resolution awarding the contract for combined bid packages 1, 2, and 3 to Miles McClellan Construction Company for the Hamby Elementary School kitchen remodeling project, Hawthorne Elementary School kitchen remodeling project, and Whittier Elementary School kitchen remodeling project as the lowest responsible bidder and authorizing execution of the contract with Miles McClellan Construction Company.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Swartz.
Thank you. So there are a couple interesting facts here for both the board and the public. Number one, all of the scope in the 3 buildings in questions are part of what we call our first phase of the facilities master plan. Tied to that are the 2019 bond funds. So first and foremost, we're using existing funds that the community's already approved to do the construction portion of this contract. The total contract is $975,712. Of that, $711,433 are bond funds. The remainder of the contract is being funded, as was that VSWC contract, from food service funds. They are funding all the kitchen equipment that is permitted and allowable within the rules of their use of funds. So again, roughly a little over a quarter is food service, 3/4 is bond funds in full alignment with existing bonds, the use of them, and the phase 1 of the facilities master plan for these 3 elementaries and their kitchen renovations. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
When does the construction begin? I know that we're expecting for it to end around August 1st.
So August 1st is what we call substantial completion, and that essentially means it's ready for us to move in. Construction, though, in terms of the process, starts tomorrow, literally. So there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of back and forth, a lot of documents that go back and forth. So literally tomorrow, to meet the August 1st, we literally start in the weeds tomorrow with them, getting paperwork, making sure they're buying and providing what we wanted, things of that nature, full with the contract. So the process starts tomorrow. The actual bricks and sticks, messing with it, will start about a week after school's out.
And Mr. Swartz, other than some punch items on those buildings, is this the last part of those projects from that 2000, in these buildings from the 2019 bond for the most part? Like,
for the most part, the
pieces?
exception would be we're working on some documentation to complete some work at Hawthorne still. But the other two schools at this time have no other scope on the radar.
Mostly
relative
just
to the bond issue.
punch type issues?
Correct. We're still closing out some of those contractors that completed work last summer, but we're actually closing out that paperwork as we speak.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, will you please take the roll call?
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. Thank you. And board comments, who would like to go first?
Well, I can go ahead and kick us off. I first want to acknowledge and really thank everyone that came out here this evening. It was really just wonderful to see all of these amazing individuals receive the recognition that they deserved. I also want to thank our leadership here for recognition of, board members during this month. But I also just really want to just share with the community that despite everything going on in the world right now, especially in our backyards, that it's okay to not be okay, but that we have really we have a prepared staff here that are ready to help answer any questions that you may have. I also really want to share that we've been having very hard conversations just around our decision to proceed with the levy. Now we're having conversations on, taking a pause, but just letting members know in the community that, there really aren't any dumb questions. And so if at any point folks want to know more about those decisions, that we're here to answer any questions. And so I'll turn it over to my colleagues here.
Well, our booster groups are incredible, so, I think we all just cannot even begin to express our appreciation to them. And thanks to the high school students who showed up to help recognize us. That's really a special treat, so thanks to y'all for putting that together. Regarding the decision not to put the levy on the ballot coming up in May, I just want to say that, this is our opportunity, because everybody in the community, I don't care how you voted on the last levy or if you were thinking you might support a next one, everybody in this community has a vested interest in making sure that our schools are properly funded. And so I'm just asking you now, we are going to be putting the call out to have people be engaged in that and to having their voices heard, and this is your chance. So please step up. This is for all of us. It's our community. It's our legislature, and if we don't speak up now, we can't complain later. So please join us.
I'll echo my colleagues' thank you to all of the PTAs, the PTSAs, the boosters, Westerville Education groups. So much time and so many volunteer dollars go into those things to help our students succeed, and we thank you for helping our students with that. With regards to funding and the levy, these are not easy decisions to decide to go on, when to go on, how much to ask for, and I think we're all trying to do the best we can to figure out in a very uncertain climate what's going to be the best decision for our students, our staff, and the taxpayers of the district. So like Anissa said, people have questions, feel free to reach out, and hopefully we will be able to rally the troops and maybe get somewhere with the state legislature.
So I'm going to repeat some of the stuff. Just thank you so much to each and every volunteer in our district. Everything you do truly does make a difference and touches all the kids, and it is deeply appreciated. To the Westerville Education Foundation, thank you for always investing in our staff and really our students by funding all kinds of wonderful items. As far as the students and the principals that came out tonight to thank the board members, that is probably one of the nicest things that I think has ever happened for us, for people to take time and, write little notes and things about us. That personalization really touched me. Very grateful for that. I'm humbled to serve up here, even during the hard times. As far as the levy and not going on in May, I personally am viewing this as an opportunity for me to grow and learn and listen. And I'm hoping the community does the same. And whatever you need down at the State House, I am all in. Some would say sometimes I can be a little rough. So, yep, I can throw that hat on too. So, thank you to my colleagues.
Well, I'm going to repeat some things too, right? I really want to thank all of our parents and community members and the organizations for all of their investments, both in time and in resources, the amazing donations we continue to get. Each board meeting, it's really humbling to see them, and so just really appreciate all the support that everyone puts into in our school districts. I want to congratulate the early graduates on a job well done. Wish you all the best of luck. I agree, that was such a nice treat to have the students here tonight. I don't know who put that together, but I really appreciated them coming out and spending Monday night with us. It's probably not their favorite thing to do, but it was a very nice treat. I would agree with my colleagues in that pushing pause on the levy, like we've talked about it, going on the ballot again, and then also the need for state funding. And I think now more than ever, we need to come together as a community and really speak loudly about this need to fully fund public education. We have this chance, this opportunity right now, and it's really going to matter. And as someone that does advocacy for a living, right? I know sometimes it can be very kind of intimidating, but it's actually just like having a conversation with a friend. And we have the resources that we'll be putting together to give you the talking points. So really hope that you'll join us. And I'm going to ask if someone is interested right now and they're listening to this conversation, how could they reach out to the school district to say, hey, I'm all in, I want to join? How would they do that?
They're welcome to email any of us. There's actually a button on the webpage where you can email us all at one time or to Nicole or me individually, and we'll make sure you get the information you need.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out. May I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, okay. See, I got excited too, Mr. Reeves. The board will meet in regular session on Monday, February 10th, 2025 at 6 p.m. at the Early Learning Center, which is here, 936 East Wind Drive, Westerville, Ohio, 43081. Now may I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
It's 8:04.
Thank you so much.